for joining us today. My name is Chad King. I'm the Executive Director for Sustainability at DU. I glad to see all of you in the attendance group. Also very excited to intro this excellent panel that we have today to really dive into this issue of plastics. We have quite the expert group here, so I'll just do some quick introductions and then turn it over. So this is the powerhouse team behind some of the reporting you've likely seen if you're into waste and recycling and have seen some of the reports that have come out in the last couple of years. We have Danny Katz, Executive Director of the Colorado Public Interest Research Group, CoPIRG. Danny grew up in Boulder, graduated from Fairview High School. He has a BA in history from the University of Virginia and has spent the last 20 years as an organizer and advocate in Wisconsin, California, and Colorado. In 2009, he became the director of CoPIRG. He has written a groundbreaking report on the transit, walking, biking needs of Colorado and helped pass policies to rein in predatory payday loans, tackle climate pollution, and expand transit options. Randy Moorman is the director of Legislative and Community Campaigns for Ecocycle. His team at Ecocycle works on zero waste education in Boulder County and at the city of Denver. He also does advocacy work for zero waste policies at the local and state level and is currently a board member and co-chair of the Policy Committee of Recycle Colorado. And if you're in this session and don't know Recycle Colorado, you should jump into that organization as well. Randy has been with Ecocycle for 8 years. Prior to coming to Ecocycle, he worked for several different nonprofit environmental organizations, including Conservation Colorado and Earth Justice in Washington, D.C. And then finally, Matilda Thornton-Clark is the organizing director for the Student PIRGs in Colorado. She works with college students from across the state, training them on how to run effective campaigns on campus and at the state level. Matilda has been with Student PIRGs for 5 years, starting out in New Jersey. Prior to joining the team in Colorado, Matilda oversaw the Student PIRGs New Voters Project in Florida, where her team made over 85,000 get out the vote contacts to young Florida voters ahead of the 2020 election. So I'm glad to welcome all of the panelists and turn it over to them as we kick off this session.
Great, thank you. This is normally the part where I go, how's everybody doing? And then people go, we're doing great. So lost a bit on Zoom, but I'm sure you all are standing up and applauding us right now. So thank you. You can have a seat. You can sit down. You can sit down. Thank you. We are excited to talk to you about an issue that I think is way past due tackling. It's plastic pollution. We produce way too much stuff that is, we're not able to reuse, reduce, recycle. We have a production problem. And what's so frustrating about it is so much of the stuff we produce literally will take centuries to break down if it ever does. So we're going to first talk to you just about the problem with plastics and really get into some of the details there. We'll talk to you a little bit about how college campuses have been leading the charge and students have been leading the charge to push back. And then we'll talk a little bit about legislation that's happening here in Colorado that we'd love to have your help on. Mostly, we're excited to educate, but we really want to recruit. So hopefully everyone here is inspired to get involved with our different groups and with the programs that we've got going. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to this. We really can't do any of this without folks like yourself. So as much as we're excited to educate you, we really want to recruit you as well. So just keep that in mind. So Randy, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Danny, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. Get started. So again, I'm Randy Moorman, the Director of Legislative and Community Campaigns at Ecocycle. And first want to start with who is Ecocycle. We brought recycling to Colorado in 1976, launching one of the first 20 curbside recycling programs in the United States. And over 40 years, we have grown into a thriving recycling business, employing over 65 people and managing an $8 million budget. We are a recognized leader in developing innovative programs, and our staff have worked literally around the world, from Nebraska to Nepal, to help share our models with other communities. What makes Ecocycle unique is that we have hands-on experience in every aspect of building zero waste communities. We run major pieces of infrastructure like the Boulder County Recycling Center, where we process 50,000 tons of recycling per year. We also run a fleet of trucks to collect recycling and composting from businesses. And we are also educators working in schools to teach kids about the importance of recycling and composting and zero waste. We're also at local festivals and other events, of course, not during COVID, but before and soon here after COVID. We'll be back at it, educating residents and empowering people to change culture. And then lastly, we work with the local and state governments to implement policies to make recycling more convenient and accessible. I want to start, here we go. I want to start by saying that recycling plays an important role in reducing our climate emissions. This is simply because recycling saves lots of energy and reduces our need for fossil fuels and manufacturing products. Recycling and composting are one of the most effective actions at the local level that we can take to reduce carbon emissions. Yet we as a state are terrible at recycling. We recycle and compost only 16% of our waste, that's municipal solid waste. We send over 13 million tons of waste to the landfill each year, and we therefore are far below the national average. So we are leaving a lot of potential greenhouse gas savings on the table. However, today we want to talk about plastics, and I want to emphasize that we can't recycle our way out of our plastic pollution problem. We are aware of this growing crisis, and the general public has become ever more aware in the news with its impact on the oceans, impacting marine life, such as sea turtles, birds, and whales. But it isn't just the oceans that we have to worry about. Right here in Colorado, scientists are finding plastic particles in rain and dust falling on Rocky Mountain National Park. Last year, a black bear was euthanized in Boulder County, and its stomach contained only plastic trash. When plastic gets out into our environment, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, and that gets into our water, soil, and then eventually into our food. In fact, a WWF study determined that we are ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic every week through our food, water, and the air we breathe. And we know that these plastic particles contain toxic substances that are carcinogenic and developmental and endocrine disruptors. Plastic production has exploded from 2 million tons annually in 1950 to more than 440 million tons in 2015, and it is expected to quadruple in the next 30 years. We have created 8.3 million metric tons of plastic, of which 6.3 billion, that was 8.3 billion metric tons, and 6.3 billion metric tons of that is now plastic waste in our oceans, littering landscapes and floating in our rivers, and of course, sitting in our landfills. And we've only recycled 9% of all the plastics that's ever been produced on this planet. If we don't break this trend, it is estimated that by 2050, we will have more plastics in the ocean than fish by weight. And this production of plastic is only going to speed up. ExxonMobil is currently planning to invest $165 billion in expanding existing and building new petrochemical facilities in the United States. And that is looking to be as many as 264 new facilities coming online. That means more fracking, more burning of oil and gas to make plastic, more greenhouse gas emissions, and more dirty air and water, endangering the lives of residents living in plastic manufacturing communities. So, well, we often get asked, though, what is recyclable? Well, we have been recycling plastic bottles for over 30 years, and at Ecocycle, we accept plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars for recycling. This is about 90% of the plastics that we receive through our curbside and commercial services. And it's primarily number 1 PET and number 2 HDPE plastic. But we focus on a public messaging on the shape of the container rather than the number. So that's where we get plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. And there are benefits to recycling these plastics, especially 1s and 2s you can see here have tremendous value in addressing some of our environmental concerns. While there is a lot of negative press about plastics recycling, I do want to emphasize that the plastics accepted by your hauler are being recycled. So please keep recycling those and encouraging others to keep recycling as well. And here on the slide is a breakdown of how our main plastic materials in the single stream are recycled and what they're made into. But the news is that's it. So when you think about all the plastic out in the world, all the different types and shapes and uses, you see that we are only able to accept a very small fraction of what's made, even at our facility, which has one of the most diverse programs in the country. So when it comes to many other types of plastics, end markets are the single biggest challenge that we face. There are not nearly enough companies looking to buy recycled plastics. Recyclers have to take the public blame for this, and we're starting now to push back and tell the real story. And that is that many companies do not buy back their plastics that they make to make new products. And they design plastic packaging that just isn't recyclable. One of the big reasons for this is that the price of oil is low compared to the cost of recycled plastic. And you can see here on the slide, there's many other challenges that we face that we really don't see with other recyclable materials like paper and metals. So while recycling is important to fight climate change, it is not the sole solution to tackling our crisis with plastic pollution. Around the world, big organizations, countries, and more are recognizing that plastics recycling will not scale up to solve this plastics pollution problem. Major world leaders like the EU and Canada have committed to eliminating problematic single-use plastics, and major companies have even adopted similar goals. So the world is recognizing that we have to reduce plastic production first by banning or eliminating unnecessary plastics, then develop new models to reuse more packaging and then recycle what's left. And I want to just present here four of the big myths that we're kind of fighting against on this that come from the plastics industry. The first one is that plastic pollution is the fault of the consumer, that they demand this. Well, in fact, in 1969, the plastic industry reps were quoted as saying they were changing from a reusable deposit bottle model like glass to single-use plastic bottles because for every one deposit bottle, they could sell 20 single-use plastic bottles. This is not in response to consumer demand, but to their conscious choice to make a bigger profit. The second myth is that chemical recycling technologies are going to save the day and they're going to be able to recycle all of these useless plastics. Well, chemical recycling is an interesting new technology, but it isn't proven to be cleaner and better than our current recycling that we have for plastics, because we're going to face the same challenges, and that is the market. We don't have businesses to buy back these plastics. And too often these technologies then turn into a plastics to fuel system, which is clearly not recycling. The third myth is just we need to have more public education. Well, education alone doesn't change behavior. We need systematic change first, and then education can come along and help with that, like having a new policy or infrastructure to address some of these challenges. And then the final myth that we see is a popular one is that recyclers are to blame. Well, as I said before, recycling alone isn't going to solve this problem. We really have a packaging crisis and not a recycling crisis. So where should we go after we ban the worst plastics that are unnecessary? Well, fortunately, the plastics crisis has actually spawned a dramatic shift we're seeing around the world in the past 2 years. We're seeing a movement toward this idea of extended producer responsibility, or commonly referred to as EPR. And that's where the manufacturers become more responsible for the end of the life of their products. This includes paying for the collection and recycling of their materials. So the discussion is shifting now from why EPR to actually how do we successfully do it. Colorado already has an EPR model in our laws. and that is around paint. We have a program to collect, recycle, and recycle paint, and it's run by Paint Care, the paint industry organization that then collects and recycles the paint with local recyclers here in the state. It is funded by a fee on paint upon purchase. So this model is a place for us to start and build off of. And the exciting thing is right now, the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment is conducting a study to look at EPR and figure out what will work for Colorado at a more comprehensive level, addressing things like maybe mattresses and some other problem materials, but also packaging and plastics. So we are hopeful that when that study comes out in July, we'll have some direction to go to actually pass legislation in 2022. So just in conclusion, recycling is part of the solution, and Colorado does need to be better at recycling, but we need to eliminate some plastics entirely. And Danny in a little bit will talk about a bill that we're working on to just do that, because we cannot recycle our way out of this. And then finally, we're hopeful to look at EPR as a comprehensive solution coming in 2022. So I encourage you to consider becoming an eco leader with Ecocycle. It's a great way to get involved in your community. We provide resources on how you can educate your fellow neighbors and friends and your family at home on recycling. So we provide trainings on recycling 101 and composting, to bigger things like how do we build a circular economy here in the state. And then finally, we provide updates on what's happening at the state and local level around policy. And it's a great way for you to engage on that and contact your local policymakers to get them to do more to move towards zero waste. So I encourage you to contact Jasmine at ecocycle.org to be an eco leader. It's really easy, and it's a great way to get some excellent resources. So finally, if you have any questions and want to contact me, I'm Randy at ecocycle.org. Now I will pass this over to Matilda.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Okay, so I am going to talk about what students can and have been doing on this issue for a good number of years. So hi again, folks. My name is Matilda. I am an organizing director with the Student PIRGs, and I'm going to talk about our Break Free from Plastics campus work. So you can see my email here, just like Randy has his. So if you do have any questions for me or want to get involved, you can email me. I will also have a link at the end if you're a student and want to get involved this semester. But first, let me talk about who we are. So the Student PIRGs, we're a training program for student activists to make change on their campus, in their communities, and across the country. We have a dual mission. We want to train students. So, you know, we work on great issues, but students also just want to become better activists and better community organizers. So we want to train you how to do that. Then we also have we want to win campaigns. We want to actually make change, make sure that the work that we're doing is successful and productive. And so I'm going to talk about kind of what some of the work that we've done on campuses across the country looks like, how we've done that. I'll go through our progress and victories, and then talk specifically about what we're doing here in Colorado. So our campaign goals for this on campus, one is we want to pass local and state zero waste policies. So again, thinking about that circular economy, how do we eliminate all waste in our communities and in our states? So working on that. Passing local and state bans of individual plastics, so plastic bags, polystyrene, straws, making sure that as much as we can, we're taking action to eliminate these harmful plastics. We also work to get corporations and institutions to make commitments to ban items and go zero waste. So I'll talk a little bit about, you know, how we can do this on campus and get our campuses to commit to zero waste. But also, you know, corporations, like one of our campaigns that I'll talk about in a little bit is targeting Whole Foods to get rid of single-use plastic packaging on their store shelves. But then really, we also want to make sure that we're just continuing to win hearts and minds, talking about plastics. We know that it's a campaign that has huge support on both sides of the aisle, but really it's not a political issue, it's a human issue, right? Like we all care about our environment and our human health and where our materials are coming from. And so making sure that as many people as possible know about this issue, care about this issue, and want to get involved. So these are some of the levels that we work on our campuses to actually make change. So how do we do this? So I'm going to go through 3 key tactics. So one is grassroots, getting students, getting consumers to take action themselves. You can see here's an example from one of our CalPIRG chapters. They were working on the statewide bill. You can see a lot of smiling faces. That's really what we want. We want to stay hopeful about this, stay positive about this. Hope is more inspiring than fear. And so making sure that we're actually envisioning a world without plastics, without this harm to our environment, because that's really going to be the thing that motivates people to get involved. We also want to make sure we're leveraging social media. That's where the young people are. So we have a hashtag, break free from plastics, making sure that everything that we're posting, everything that we're doing is using this hashtag, so that more people can see it. You know, people click on the hashtag, they're like, what is that? And they see more about the work that we're doing. And then also we've been able to do some remote actions. We've done giveaways, remote cleanups, remote call-in days, to get people inspired, get people just seeing the amount of plastic trash in their communities and on their streets and in their waterways, and then call in to elected officials to actually do something about this. So the first thing is just engaging with students on this issue and showing them all the different ways that they can get involved. Second key tactic is grass tops. So thinking, who are the influential people on these issues? Who can we actually get to take action here? So student governments, you know, the speakers of the student population, working with them to take action, getting club presidents, not just the environmental clubs, but every club on campus, getting those folks involved and showing again that this is an issue that all students care about, that all students want to take action on. Getting small business sign-ons. I think Danny's going to talk about this a little bit, but working in our local communities to show that the restaurants and the stores that banning plastic is going to affect, they actually support this too, and they care about our environment, and they're going to do what it takes to protect it. Working with local elected officials who support this campaign, making sure that their voices are heard, that they're speaking out on this. Sustainability centers, of course, and sustainability directors. Most campuses have a great sustainability center, like the one right here at DU, where there are, you know, folks on the ground actually making sure that we have the recycling, the composting, the plastics on request where we can. And then, of course, a big group here is ocean and water related groups. So we have a lot of coalition partners who specifically work to protect waterways, protect our oceans, clean up our oceans, and we've been engaging with them as well. And so what can these folks do? They can sign on to our campaigns, they can take photo petitions. We've done remote testifying at city council and state legislature meetings and in student government meetings. You know, these are just some of the ways that we can engage with them. Obviously, the next thing I'm going to talk about is media, but co-authoring opinion pieces with some of these folks, and then hearing briefings from people who support this and hearing about what they're doing as well. And then media. So actually just making sure there's a lot of visibility on this issue, that people know about it and are hearing about it. Here is a media hit from last year. Again, one of our CalPIRG chapters at UCLA hosting a beach cleanup for plastic-free seas. So we do media when we're launching a campaign, when we're making progress on a campaign. One tactic that I think is really cool is doing brand audits. So doing plastic pickups in your area and then counting by brand, who are the biggest polluters here, what brands actually are producing the most plastic trash. It's often Coca-Cola, surprise. But actually figuring out in your local area, who are those big sources of pollution. And then getting opinion pieces, letters to the editor in the campus paper in your local area, making sure that the people who read the newspapers, which is, you know, elected officials and important folks in the area, are seeing this and are seeing that people care about it. So these are three of the tactics. And then last year, so just in the last school year, we worked on this campaign on 21 campuses across the country. 29,000 students signed a petition in support of one of these campaigns. We collected 1,000 photo or video petitions, so folks holding signs or taking a video actually saying why they care about this issue. We got 460 faculty and student group sign-ons, again, supporting eliminating single-use plastics on their campus, in their city, or in their state. And then we held 84 campaign events, so panels, conferences, cleanup days of action, call-in days of actions, just a lot of ways for students and folks to get involved. And what did we do? So what have we accomplished so far? So here are some of the victories. This is not all encompassing. This is just some of them. So the first and the big thing is that the University of California last year signed the Break Free from Plastics Pledge for all 10 campuses, eliminating single-use plastics, creating a task force made up of students, faculty, staff, and administrators to make a really comprehensive long-term plan to eliminate every single-use plastic on campus. We also did that at 2 different campuses. So Eckerd College in Florida, small private school, and then Durham Technical Community College in North Carolina also signed this pledge banning single-use plastics on their campus. We've worked to pass city resolutions, so getting towns like Eugene, Oregon and Mansfield, Connecticut to ban single-use plastics, polystyrene, and plastic bags in their communities. We've done this in other states, but these are 2 of the most recent, or in other cities, but these are 2 of the most recent. And then we've worked to help make sure that statewide bills are getting passed. So we're doing this here in Colorado. Danny's going to talk about that, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But working where we have state groups to make sure that we're making progress at the higher level, at the state level as well. And then there's also ways that campuses can make progress on this. So for example, Rutgers University in New Jersey banned single-use plastic bags in their dining halls. That's not an all-encompassing policy, but it does get rid of those plastic bags from dining halls where 65,000 students go every day. So they completely switched to giving students reusable bags at the start of the semester, and then they don't need that harmful plastic in their dining halls. So here's what we're doing in Colorado. So again, our students are working with Danny at CoPIRG, with our partners at Environment Colorado on our statewide bill. We want to pass policies on campus. So at CU Boulder, CSU Fort Collins, and here at Denver University. We're also working on a corporate campaign. So like I said, getting Whole Foods to actually commit to eliminating single-use plastics in their stores entirely. So they've eliminated single-use bags, but their store shelves are full of single-use plastics. And so I did promise I was going to drop this, but if you are looking to get involved, there's our interest form. So if you want to help work on this at your campus or in your state, fill out that interest form. We can get you set up with a remote internship or volunteer opportunities so that you can actually get involved and start making change on this. And then I had my email on the first slide, but I'll drop this in the chat as well. Very simple. It's just Matilda@studentpurge.org. If you have questions or you're not a student, but you still want to get involved, send me an email and we can connect. And now I will pass it to Danny to talk about our statewide bill.
Excellent. Great. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to quick background on CoPIRG and then what the policy is that we are working on right now with our all right, so present mode here. All right, so we want to move beyond plastics, and our focus, what I'm going to talk to you about is moving beyond plastics at the Capitol here in Colorado. So CoPIRG, we were actually started by college students. We were actually started by the Student PIRGs that Matilda was giving you background on. We were started back in 1974. We speak out for a healthier, safer world in which we all are freer to pursue our individual well-being and the common good. We use 3 major things: research, advocacy, and organizing to accomplish what we set out to do. And we have a number of other programs that you can see there. I do a lot of work on transportation in particular in Denver. So if you're interested in that issue, we can connect you on that as well. Here's our proposal. So we were looking at the state of Colorado, and as Randy said, we ultimately want to get to a point where the responsibility is really on the entities that are producing this stuff, that they should produce them in ways that are reusable, and so that's ultimately where we want to get to, and worst comes to worst, actually produce them in a way that they can be recycled and actually take responsibility to taking those things back. As he mentioned, we have a agency in Colorado that's looking into this, and they won't be ready to really report on what the proposal would be until this summer. So for this legislative session, we're thinking, well, let's go after that first problem, which is just let's get rid of the worst stuff, the stuff that we use once and then it pollutes our communities for centuries. I mean, nothing we use once should pollute our world for decades and centuries to come. So we have a couple of ideas. The first is to repeal what's called preemption. In the state of Colorado, local governments are actually prohibited from passing policies regulating regulating plastic pollution. And this is an effort that goes back, industry groups have oftentimes done this for the specific products or things that they care about. So this was passed in a number of states to try to preempt or stop local governments from acting. And so in Colorado, we want to lift that. We think, local governments are laboratories of democracy. They should be able to move forward and protect their communities and their citizens. And so we want to make sure that they have that ability. So that's one thing that we would love to see the legislature act on, is repeal that preemption law and allow local governments to act. The second is to focus in on polystyrene, commonly referred to as styrofoam. This is a particularly bad form of single-use plastic. It's soft, and so it can break apart really easily, but it doesn't actually break down. It just gets into smaller and smaller bits and then becomes those microplastics that Randy was talking about earlier. We see these in to-go food containers and cups and in plates. And so we'd love to just eliminate those from all food retail establishments, which, think of it, restaurants, bars, the places where you can get your food in grocery stores, those open areas where you can, make a salad or whatnot, really across the board, food trucks, other places. So that's the second thing we'd like to see. The third is we'd like to eliminate the single-use plastic bags at point of sale. There are some plastic bags that are used to wrap, to put your fruit in or your vegetables in, but we're talking about those bags that you get when you're checking out. Target and eliminate single-use plastic bags at that moment. And then in order to avoid this dynamic of having single-use paper bags suddenly take off, we'd love to see a 10-cent fee on single-use paper bags, which can ensure that we don't just switch to another item that we use once. And even though it's a little bit easier to recycle, it still has a huge climate impact. And so we don't want to see a big influx of that. And any of the money that's taken in from this fee can be split among the retailer and the local government and can go to all sorts of zero waste strategies. So this would be our proposal. If I was a legislator and I was asked what should the bill be, this is what I would say the bill should be. And so we are actively working with legislators right now and telling them this would be the best thing to do as we tee up the longer term producer responsibility work. And so what does that mean? Well, the timing of all this, big asterisks there for COVID. We don't exactly know if this will play out the way it's supposed to, but as of right now, the legislature will reconvene. They convene for a couple days in January. They'll come back in mid-February, and they might wrap sometime around June. Again, it might get postponed because of COVID, but we really have February to June to work on this. Like most bills, it has to pass out of the key committees and go through the House and the Senate before that June deadline hits, and then we have to get Governor Jared Polis to sign it as well. So, we've got to go through that process, get the bill written and introduced. Our strategy is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of support for this. I mean, a lot of people get this. And so we want to just keep reminding legislators how much broad support there is out there among the environmental community, among people who want to see better recycling programs, among restaurants and other businesses that are impacted by this, really among anyone and everyone. So we're going to continue to demonstrate broad support. We really want to highlight the environmental importance of this, though. We just can't wait. I mean, this is something where every year we produce millions and millions of these products. And as Randy showed earlier, very few of them are getting recycled. And so, every year we're producing millions of these products, and they're going to take centuries to break down if they ever do. And so this is not a problem we can just wait on and put off for a couple of years. And we want to really highlight the environmental importance. We're a green state. We're also a headwater state. So a lot of this stuff gets into our waterways and is fueling the pollution that's going into our oceans on both sides of our continent. And then lastly, we just want to answer questions about the implementation of this. So much of policymaking is wondering, well, what is actually going to happen if we do this? And so we just want to be out in front, letting people know how this would impact. So many restaurants are already making this transition. This will not, this is something that is possible. And a lot of other states have taken this action. A lot of other cities and states have this already implemented. So just answering those questions and making sure people understand that this is totally possible and necessary. One of the best ways you can join us is we have a specific youth lobby day that we are organizing. And when we say youth, we mean really anybody, but we're really kind of trying to get elementary school, middle school, high school, college students to come forward because we think your voice is so important. When we think about issues, there's a lot of full-time lobbyists at the Capitol. And oftentimes the easiest way to break through all the noise is to have a young person come forward, because frankly, not a lot of young people participate in the political process, not as much as some other groups. And so having young people come forward, these are photos of previous lobby days that we did with Ecocycle and others. And so we're planning on doing one on March 10th. It'll be virtual, so we'll be setting up Zoom meetings like this. And we'll set up the meetings for you. So we'd love to have a contingent or a couple of contingents from DU participate in that day. It'd be great. And it's a great opportunity for you to share your thoughts on why this is important and add that personal component. We can give them all the stats in the world, but having somebody say, here's why I care, here's why this is important for my community and for my future, makes such a big impact. And so we'd love to organize that and help have you all participate in that. So if you're at all interested, that's a great way to get involved. And so again, you know, 3 different ways that you can get involved. You can do all or some. We are really excited to participate with anybody here on this campus who wants to make a big difference on this issue. And, you know, again, this is one step in a long step to get to that zero waste world that we envision. But these are some important steps. We've got to get rid of some of the worst stuff out there. And then we've got to put some producer, you know, some responsibility back, such that the things that are being produced are things that can be reused, that we are reducing the need for even having some of this stuff to begin with, and that those things we don't reduce, we're actually recycling. So on that note, let's open it up, and hopefully people have some questions or ideas or thoughts, and we can take a look if either in the chat or the Q&A. Let's see, we have a question about what prevents compostable plastic from taking off. Randy, do you want to take a swipe at this one?
Sure, absolutely. So compostable plastic, and again, or commonly bioplastic, it's made from corn mostly. And we, you know, do see that being used more in some communities and some restaurants and businesses using it, even compostable bags. And it is a good alternative to plastic. It certainly isn't the end-all solution. There are challenges with it. One, it's made from corn that usually is GMO corn, actually. So there's a lot of environmental and health concerns around that. And then the other challenge we have is then actually composting it. It is not something that you can compost in your backyard. Your backyard compost does not get hot enough to break it down. And so it needs to go to a commercial facility. And the commercial facilities are actually finding it somewhat challenging because of wind and other factors as they're trying to treat their compost rows, that plastic gets carried up by the wind and then actually becomes a pollutant in nearby farmland and elsewhere. So it is not an easy thing to deal with on the composting end. And so while it is better than polystyrene, that is for sure. And I would also caution, you know, restaurants and businesses sometimes will pay that extra price for the compostable containers, which is good, but it is not necessarily good in that if it doesn't get composted. So they need to also have the proper collection to make sure it gets composted along with using that container. Because if it goes to the landfill, it's just producing methane like other organic material is, and that's not good. So so it's kind of one of those things where it you know, could be better than some products already out there, the plastic products, but it is not the end-all solution. And we would certainly encourage the direction needs to be towards reusables. And we're seeing some really exciting and innovative things around reusables. I kind of imagine this idea of a red box type thing set up at McDonald's that you already see with videos. Why not have something like that for a reusable food container where you put in a deposit, you get your reusable food container, you take it up to the counter, get your food, take it home. If you keep it and wash it and reuse it, then you lose your deposit. Or if you return it, you get your deposit back. And we're seeing some of those kind of systems starting to crop up. So it's very exciting. And that's really the direction that we need to go on, especially, you know, the food takeout and delivery systems.
One other comment on the compostable here in Denver, if you all live actually in Denver, Denver does offer a program where you can pay a little bit more per month and get a green curbside compost bin It's not available for apartment buildings yet, or at least your landlord would have to go through a process to try to get it. So that is what Randy's talking about, is you actually need a specific bin and it needs to get to the right place. We are hopeful that the city of Denver will offer a program where everybody gets a curbside compost bin, just like you would a recycling and trash bin. And the places where we see the communities have those, they have much better diversion rates and recycling rates. And in fact, Ecocycle and CoPIRG do a joint report on recycling rates here in Colorado, and the cities that have those easy access, it's night and day how much better their rates are. And it looks like somebody has a compost bin on the Zoom webinar and likes it, and I love mine too. So it's amazing how much goes in it. It's amazing how much you can reduce your own personal waste by putting it in there. But then it's also amazing how everything else that I have is basically plastic packaging. And so we really do have to get at that. What other questions do people have? Please put it in the Q&A, put it in the chat. We have a few more minutes here. We'd love to answer any other questions.
As we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I just thought I could provide a little bit of an update for people that are on campus in terms of ways to get involved in some of these issues on campus. Know that last year, USG, our undergrad student government, did pass a resolution that says none of their funds can be used for single-use plastics. So that was them taking the step to control what they could control. So we need to make sure that they remember that moving forward, since we haven't been purchasing much of anything for the last 10 months or so. So that's one thing. Know too that if you are in an apartment and can't compost, like Danny just mentioned, we will be looking at, I believe in the spring quarter, we'll be launching out of my office a commercial compost opportunity for people that come through campus. So if you're in an apartment nearby and you're on campus for classes and stuff, you'd have an option. And then I think the last thing just to keep in mind is that know that, especially those of you that are in position to spend, used so decentralized, that we have the ability to sort of affect change in our own little realm. So we can decide to not buy these things, and we can set an example for other units in terms of how that can happen. So some things to think about, and I'll let either one of you jump in on the question about recycling resources. And
yeah, I think the reason you get conflicting, so the question is conflicting info about what can be recycled, what's reliable, comprehensive. The reason you get conflicting info is because it depends on the local community. As part of what Randy said earlier, you can put something in a recycling bin, but it doesn't get recycled unless there's an end market and there's a infrastructure in place to get the thing to the end market. And so you do get conflicting information about what is recyclable because it kind of depends on the community you're in. Honestly, one of the best resources is Ecocycle. I go there quite often to at least get a sense of what's even in the realm of recyclability. I then still have to check with Denver, the city of Denver, because that's where I live, to make sure Denver does collect it. But I'll let Randy talk a little bit more about that. They have a great resource. Ecocycle generally can break down, here's some rules of thumb, and at least that can help you.
Yeah, you can go to our website, ecocycle.org, and we have an A to Z guide. It's right at the top of our website, so you can just click on that and you can put in what item you're questioning about whether it's recyclable or not, and it'll tell you pretty quickly if it is recyclable and where. Of course, we have hard to recycle items that you don't put in your single stream bin, but you can bring to facilities like our Center for Hard to Recycle Materials in Boulder to be recycled. Things like electronics and mattresses and yoga mats and bicycle parts, you name it. We have quite a bit of a collection of hard to recycle items that we accept that we have been able to find little niche markets to take those and have them being reused and repurposed and remanufactured into something else. There are places around Denver. Sustainability is another place that is similar to our CHARM, or Center to Hard to Recycle Materials, that is in Denver and Arvada, that also takes a lot of those similar materials. So check their websites. And as Danny said, and if you're in Denver, make sure you check Denver Recycle's website that has guidelines for what they accept in their single stream. So it really, again, depends on where you live. If you're outside of Denver in another community, check with your municipality or your county. And if you've got a hauler that's hauling from your home check with your hauler. They should be able to give you guidelines about where they're taking their recyclables and what materials are accepted.
We also have a question just about strategies for marketing zero waste values to corporations that have, that have prioritized profits with single-use plastics. Kind of two comments here, and I think Matilda, I'll ask you to weigh in as well, because I think one of our best resources is you all, young people. So a lot of companies want to be the kind of company that you all want to work for and work at. And so much of the work that we do is about creating this world in which, young people are demonstrating their values vocally in social media settings and policy settings, so that these companies realize if they want to recruit you, they've got to shift their practices. But there's also a little bit of just calling them out as well. I mean, we use strategies like media and trying to highlight, which companies are ahead and which companies are farther behind, and try to create that sort of positive competition, and calling out those that just have practices that are just not living up to where they need to go. And then the last thing is just working on the economic side of this as well. I mean, ultimately, we want the products to have value. And if we can create a system where the stuff that's produced has value, companies are going to be more likely to want to take them back and reuse them and recycle them in different ways. So maybe trying to turn the tide on how people value this is another strategy. So those are a few, but Matilda, why don't you talk a little bit about why youth are just so important in this equation?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what Danny said at the beginning, companies are shifting more and more to care about what young people think. You're the consumers, you're the future consumers, you're the future employees, showing the power of young people and showing that young people are going to be more likely to buy there or work there if corporations are kind of taking their needs seriously. And a lot of the needs now are around sustainability and having a workplace environment where you feel like you're doing more good than harm. And so just being able to highlight that and show all, social media, just getting a ton of grassroots support on this to present to corporate stakeholders. And, it takes a while. Sometimes they're not willing to meet with us right away, or they're like, well, look at all these good things we're already doing, showing them that it takes more than just putting up a good front to actually make some change and do good.
We might be out of time. I don't know. Looks like, yeah. Chad, is there anything you wanted to do to wrap us up? I think, again, we've emphasized we can't do the work we want to do without you all getting involved. So we ask you, please dive in, whether it's, with some of the programs that each and every one of us are doing, or just what you're doing on campus. Please get involved. That's our big message to you all, because this is going to take a lot of us. So I'll leave it on that. And Chad, I don't know if there's anything else to say.
No, thank you all for joining us. And I would just reiterate be involved. There's lots of ways to start on campus and to get involved in things that are much broader than where we are. And we're in the capital, the capital city, so it's easy enough to be involved even when we can be not virtual in that involvement. So and I just welcome each of you as panelists. If you want to share things onto campus, we're always a resource through our office to share that. If those of you that are listening have not signed up for our newsletter that comes out weekly, please do that. It's a great way to see some of these opportunities to get involved. But of course, you'll be going to follow Ecocycle and CoPIRG as soon as you get off this call. So thanks so much for everyone, and we appreciate your time and all the great work that you're doing. And we will see plastics disappear in the next few years.
Thanks.
Thanks.